Hi there, I'm Tom Riordan, and welcome to episode 6 of the Cookieless Present by SugarFree. Our goal for this show is to share honest conversations with advertising and marketing industry experts who are living through a changing digital identity landscape. Today, I'm excited to be sitting with Olivia Kory. Olivia has been at Netflix, Quibi, Sonos, and most recently Haus, which we'll talk about more today. Prior to that, Olivia and I worked together at TubeMogul, where we worked on some pretty disruptive customer solutions like incrementality testing and the rolling out of open source viewability reporting for video. So we have some good war stories together. Olivia, thank you very much for joining me and our audience today.
Thanks, Tom. It's good to be here.
Before we get into questions, why don't you give the audience a little more background on yourself? I kind of summarized some of the stops that you had, but talk about the journey that you've been through in advertising and what's led you to Haus today, and then we can talk about Haus in a little bit more depth.
Sounds good. So as you mentioned, you and I worked together, came up in the Chicago ad industry, working on enabling more automated media buying at TubeMogul. Then moved out to LA and fortunately, automation, algorithmic media buying was top of mind for Netflix. Was able to move over there and join the digital marketing team. And Netflix was particularly interesting and really like where the Haus story begins, because the directive there was to really make the marketing work more like a product org. And in the same way, you know, in terms of the Netflix product experience, no two people see the same Netflix, highly personalized, highly algorithmic, automated. They took all those principles to the marketing. And with that, another kind of key tenet was experimentation. So we were constantly running really well-designed, kind of clean, controlled experiments, finding big winners, rolling them out all over the globe. And as a result, we had a pretty clean understanding of what paid media and marketing was delivering to the business in a world where it was really hard to understand because there's so much organic demand and word of mouth. And I think, you know, the reason for that is we staffed that project with tons of data science and analytics resources. And really, I mean, great for Netflix and the Ubers and the Airbnbs of the world, but not realistic for most other companies.
Explain that problem a little bit more, Olivia. Like, why does Netflix have a hard time telling what incremental gains they were getting from their advertising relative to somebody else, where they felt the need to hire a bunch of smart folks, yourself included, to solve that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is the problem of incrementality. So you actually taught me this, Tom, in terms of the correlation causation problem. And it really comes down to, I'll give an example of, in real world terms, when, you know, you are standing outside McDonald's at the drive-thru, holding up a sign saying, buy a Big Mac. And I'm already pulled into the drive-thru and I end up ordering my Big Mac. I was going to come in anyway. Someone told me, you know, I was in the mood for McDonald's. Someone told me to go try the new Big Mac. Like that marketing or you holding up that sign did not cause that action. And Netflix was very concerned about making sure they weren't paying for conversions that would have happened anyway.
Because Netflix is an awesome product with all sorts of organic demand where people are going to use it and download it regardless of the ads that you serve them.
Exactly. Tons of organic demand. And this is a problem for more established brands. You know, Airbnb, you can think of just these ubiquitous brands like Airbnb and Uber. A lot of their signups, if you will, are happening organically through non-paid channels. And they really want to make sure that they have an understanding of what they're actually paying for and who would have come in anyway versus who is being driven by the marketing.
Got it. Okay. And so at Netflix, you're solving this problem with a bunch of human beings. And then to pick up on your story, you kind of said this is something that probably other advertisers have to solve as well.
Yeah. So made a couple stops along the way, but really back in August of last year, I joined Haus and our founder, Zach, because this was really driven on the premise of everyone should have the tools to understand what's working and what's not and what's driving the business. Attribution is broken. And to the extent that you believed in click-based attribution to begin with, I think that's questionable. But to the extent that you were using something like an MTA with the way the world is moving in terms of privacy, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
And you're not going to be able to actually track those users through their journey. So with kind of, I think, seeing the wins in privacy and, the way a company like a Netflix or an Uber was solving this, we created Haus to really do this as SaaS and create a platform where we're automating all the heavy lifting of experiment design, because experiments are really hard. And we focus primarily on geo experiments. And there's a reason folks don't do this often. It's really hard to find a nice balanced control and treatment, and really tricky to execute and pull off right and then to analyze. So we're trying to automate all of that heavy lifting in terms of the data science work, such that you can really scale up your experimentation, get these learnings in weeks versus months, and use that to inform your business decisions.
Got it. Okay. So it's a SaaS platform to help advertisers determine incrementality from media decisions.
Totally.
Awesome. And the problem that you're solving, you talked about correlation versus causation. That's been a challenge in digital advertising, but we've tried, for decades, but we've tried to extract as much value out of correlated analyses as we can. And some of the ones you mentioned, MTA and MMM, very much rely on correlation. Some advertisers at times feel like they're getting a lot of value from those. Were you an advertiser, in your time at Netflix and Sonos? Did you ever lean on tools like that and feel like you were getting value out of them? Or have you always been like part of the incrementality camp? And kind of what I'm getting at is the Haus solution solving a longstanding problem, or does it have more to do with the ID landscape falling apart and this modern problem that we're facing?
I think depending on who you talk to, some folks will answer this differently. My personal belief, and I was kind of indoctrinated into this working with you on the Allstate business, where they were pioneers in incrementality, and working at Netflix, where we've always been mindful of the flaws of attribution. And sometimes you do need real-time metrics to report on. Like, that is a reality. And in those moments, you need to use what you have, which is correlation. But I think we've known that marketing measurement problems like this have existed for years, and really privacy is just, I think, accelerating it, such that to the extent that you believe these tools worked, whether you are a believer or not, they won't work moving forward.
So regardless of the McDonald's example, which is still a great example, time is going to make it harder to use correlated analysis at all. So if you're getting any value out of it today, you're going to be struggling that much more in the future.
Yeah. And I think there's also I think smaller brands who have less organic demand can lean on it a little bit more. I think sometimes attribution is good enough. And so in that way, I don't think everyone spending at any budget level needs tools like this, but certainly if you're spending in multiple channels, you should be validating that what you're getting by these platforms and what they're saying you're getting is indeed your return.
Yep. You need some way to disentangle all the contributions of all these different channels that you're activating. So these are reasons that this is smart for an advertiser to move to a less ID-based approach, like what you're doing with Haus. When you think of yourself as a consumer, as a mom, does privacy and ID tracking and the idea that it's like consumers versus surveillance advertisers, do you buy into that sort of dichotomy or that battle? Or are you happy to give your information away to intermediaries and companies and businesses and trust them to do with it? Like, how do you personally, what's your personal opinion on this privacy debate?
Yeah, so I have a hot take on this one. I don't care at all about my personal privacy. And the reason for that is, there's a reason these products are free. I'm not paying for Facebook. I'm not paying for YouTube. They are amazing services, and I expect ads. And if I'm going to get ads, I'd rather them be good and personalized versus irrelevant. So that's one piece. And then the second is, in terms of user privacy, I get emailed every week about a data breach that's happened where my personal data was compromised. like MyFitnessPal and even LastPass, which is a password storer that we use at Haus to securely store all of our passwords. Like they emailed us, they had a data breach last week. So I guess my take on that is like my data is already out there, and I don't think advertising is the place where like it's going to solve some of these user privacy issues.
I think that's interesting. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, because your data is already out there. I think there's some truth to that. I think what's also interesting too is you hear a lot of people who are offering privacy compliant ad solutions, really focusing on the emotional aspect of it. I've probably done that with my SugarFree brand to some extent because that appeals to a lot of decision makers. But in your case, you're really just selling the cold hard utility of geo-based lift testing. So it's interesting. You're less attached to like the personal mission or privacy, and you're more just someone who's been a marketer and knows this works and knows now is the time to be implementing this sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think part of it is Apple is building the fastest growing advertising business in the world right now. Their incentives for these campaigns around user privacy are really messy. Like I think they did this all under the guise of user privacy, and they use those ads as a way to get market share. And like, I think that's wrong. So, I think, and then the regulators, like these government policies, I don't think they truly understand how this stuff works. So, I think it's in certain cases being done, like the stuff is being done for the wrong reasons and the wrong incentives. But nevertheless, it's happening and there's no going back. And what we're doing, and I think SugarFree as well, is all of these folks are moving in this direction where they're trying to figure out alternate identifiers and ways to solve for this and to continue stitching these user graphs. And we're like, it's a waste of time. Like there's only going to be more and more privacy changes. It's going to get harder and harder. Let's go in the complete opposite direction and do something that will persist through all of these changes. And that is geo.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've definitely heard that perspective that I probably agree with that we shouldn't assume Apple are really making all their business moves for the sake of privacy. And when you look at what they did to Meta, I mean, they really blew a hole in that business by reducing the amount of mobile IDs that they were getting access to. So practically, regardless of their motives, which I think is kind of the point you're making, the world is changing, the world has changed. And it's time to make accommodations accordingly.
Yeah, why should Apple be able to target you based on your interests, but Meta can't? And that's what's happening right now, where I think if you're buying in the Apple ecosystem, they can use your data, and there is no opt-in or allow app to track you. Why should they be able to do that and not Meta?
Right. But I guess more importantly, regardless of our opinion on that, the rules are changing is kind of the bigger point. And so what are we going to do about it as some of these signals go away?
Totally.
So thinking of when you felt the call to action, when you said ID-based measurement is falling apart, unique correlation versus causation was broken, but the signal is getting weaker. Was there a moment when you woke up and said, I can never look at MTA or I can never look at MTA again, or I'm going to stop relying on user level experiments because your pool of users who you could conduct that against has gone away? Do you think many advertisers can still get away with that for some time period? I'm trying to get a sense of the sense of urgency that advertisers should feel for moving to ID-less measurement.
Yeah. One of our customers, Brian, from FanDuel, and I'll just shout out because it's such a good quote. He said, I'm actually happy about these privacy changes because I think it's going to make us all better marketers. And that really stuck with me because I think what this means is you should no longer be trying to drive these numbers on a Google Analytics report. And that's what I think was happening quite often is, that was the report you handed to your leadership and it says you're doing a good job, but does that actually, correspond to what's driving your business? And no, the answer is no. Sometimes, but we've seen cases where last click or click-based measurement is undervaluing Meta by 500%. And, on the flip side, we've seen cases where customers who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in brand search are seeing no lift to their business. Whereas, reporting on last click, those, they would very much be spending on the search side. So I think this is something that everyone should be focusing on, really questioning and digging into the platform reporting you're getting and finding ways to validate that what Google and what Facebook are telling you you're getting is actually, again, what's driving your business. And the way to do that now, the only way, like I'd say, whereas before you could use Facebook conversion lift and Google conversion lift, there were some tools to understanding this stuff. With all of the privacy breakdowns, it's really hard to adequately segment users into treatment and control. And we think, the way by which you can actually understand this is through geo-testing. And it's also the way you can compare one platform to another. Because if you're using Facebook solution for Facebook, how do you compare that or reconcile that with Google? So yeah, that's, I think everyone should be really skeptical of click-based reporting just based on what we've seen. And sometimes it will lead you in the wrong direction. And sometimes, it can point you in the right direction, but it's a coin flip.
So let's talk about the process a little bit more, because of course advertisers would want to know that their branded search wasn't contributing as much as they thought it was. Of course, many advertisers have hunches that might be the case, or the Meta example that you just shared, wondering if it's actually getting enough credit in the current system that you're using. These are super common advertiser problems. What is it about what you figured out at Haus, or what is it about geography that makes solving these problems easier than doing it with legacy platforms?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying the first piece is that it's a comparable methodology that you can use across all platforms. Anywhere you're buying that allows you to geo-target, you can use this methodology. So that's the one big piece. And then second, geo-testing has been around for a while. It is, in terms of the scientific method, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, you want to run a brand search test based on where your sales are taking place. We think this group of geos is very comparable to this other group of geos. So don't spend on brand search in this set and spend your kind of business as usual brand search budget in this other set of markets. And we get a really clean comparable of, all right, the only difference here is that you're spending in brand search. These geos otherwise would have behaved exactly the same way. That's a lot of what we're doing, is making sure those geos are balanced, and we can draw that conclusion. But so that's it is truly here is what you're getting without spending brand search, and then and here is the uplift. So it's just kind of classic treatment control. There's no modeling that happens. That's another big piece of what we're seeing here. You could see in your own data if you had data scientists to go dig in and look at this at that level of granularity. But there's no, we joke, there's a lot of science work to balance those geos and make sure that the analysis is sound, that we've removed anomalies. If something weird is happening in New York, for instance, we can downweight that market for the period of the test. So we have those tools in place to clean the data and smooth it. But ultimately, this is what's happening in your business, and we're just reporting on it.
Got it. And that sounds like something like maybe a team of data scientists and ad experts could do on your behalf. But your innovation is doing that with the software platform, so advertisers can now do it at scale more regularly. Totally.
One question we get is, hey, Facebook has an R package that they've open sourced for geo experiments. And that's great. But I was a growth lead and I didn't know how to use it. I couldn't even imagine having the time to figure it out. So again, the tools exist, they're out there. There are in-house data science teams who focus on it. And what we do is we really try and remove all of that heavy lifting such that your data science team can focus on other more strategic work. and they're not doing geo splits every week for a different test. And it's really messy. And again, I understand why folks don't do it. So that's really like we're trying to automate that in between period where you've decided you want to run more experiments and you don't have the data science resources, or the data science team, frankly, has other priorities to make that happen and to enable it.
Got it. So those folks can now use this tool and get a bunch of time back on their plate and some capabilities added too.
Totally.
Okay, and let's talk about what else is going on at Haus. Geo experiments is kind of the main product for advertisers, I understand today. But then there's some promotion testing and some other things that you guys are adding to your toolkit. You want to talk about your roadmap a little bit, or some of the other places where you guys are helping advertisers?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say the geo experiments is our most mature product, what most of our customers are paying for right now. And again, really, what we're proud of is that folks have found things that work, folks have found things that don't work, and they're making really big kind of strategic allocation shifts as a result. And so that's, again, the core product. We're expanding into incrementality for CRM. And the premise here being that in traditional propensity modeling, sometimes you score your users. Once they've purchased with you, you have records of your customers. You score them based on their likelihood to purchase. And the way offers and promotions are being done, I guess to take a step back, most promotions are just blanket offers. Like, hey, I'm going to give 20% off to everybody for this time period. There's no personalization there. It's just kind of a blanket offer. And what you're doing there is you're offering it to people who maybe would have purchased at full price. So you're leaving money on the table. And the evolution of that, and I think the next step is folks use propensity modeling to say, here are my highest value users. And then they give them the best offer, which actually should probably be quite the opposite, where, again, these are your highest value users. They're probably going to buy more products from you at full price. And so we're working on different causal ML models to say, what action does this, or what incentive does this user need to take an action that they would not have taken anyway? And that's, again, what we're calling causal ML. And we're seeing some really, I think, dramatic wins here where we're able to run these experiments pretty quickly, get the training data to then say, hey, go target these users with this offer. And it's having a pretty, I'd say, dramatic impact on the bottom line of these businesses.
Got it. And you're still in the privacy safe, future durable world, because now instead of dealing with anonymous geo cohorts, you're dealing with consented first party data, people who the brand has the right to do analytics on and target and so on and so forth.
Exactly. These are existing customers who already opted in for marketing.
So still under the umbrella of incrementality, still privacy safe and durable into the future, but now a little more fine-tuned towards promotions.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, well, I've gotten lots of good information on Haus. Maybe as we come up to wrap here in a minute, let's take a step back. Looking into a few years down the road, thinking of the changing identity landscape, probably less signals available. How do you think that changes the story that you all are bringing to market today? Do you expect to have a richer competitive set at that point because you think more folks are going to go down this path? Or what are kind of your predictions for the future versus where you're at today?
Yeah, I think, short term, what we're hearing and what's really starting to, I think, become a more mainstream approach is platform reporting is no longer sufficient. We need to calibrate this platform data with experiments and incrementality. And I think looking out, we believe MTA is probably going to be the biggest casualty of all this. It just can't work moving forward. But I think there's a world where you are kind of triangulating performance using MMM, platform reporting, and experiments. And some brands don't need MMM, but if you're spending in multiple channels, perhaps you do. But I don't think there's a single source of truth, and we don't claim to be that single source of truth. I think there's going to very much be a triangulation of performance across these three sources. And we believe, you should kind of use this data and then also inform your decisions with expert judgment. Like, sometimes you won't always be able to design a test to answer a question. And so we say be data informed, but you know your business better than anyone. So it is that, like, the job of a marketer is to take these data and then use their judgment to make those decisions.
Well, and the more time you spend leaning on software solutions to handle a lot of the operational pieces, a lot of the mathy pieces, and you can free up those experts to be available, right? I think the more you enable yourself to do what you're describing.
Totally.
All right. Well, that's probably a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Olivia, for joining. Thank you, everyone who tuned in to listen. If you want to hear more conversations like this, you can find all our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music. I'll continue to post fresh conversations every few weeks. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Tom.